I wait for some of you to jump on. I ducked in under a mesquite tree. This is a mesquite tree, and it's going to give me some shade as I take some time to deep dive into the topic of living in blame, shame, guilt, resentment, anger, and inner bondage towards yourself and towards the people in your life. Uh, Perhaps a mom, a dad, a sister, a brother, a friend, somebody in your circle of life that you have pointed the finger at and blame them for your own difficulties in life, your challenges, and so wanted to take some time to jump in and share my thoughts on it. I had an absolutely beautiful morning doing my spiritual practice out here in the trail, and what was precipitated it was a show yesterday that I did with Mary Hill. Good morning to Linda. Thank you for joining me, coming in from Canada. Adele Jacobs, one more time, coming in from South Africa. Thank you so much for joining me in this beautiful mesquite tree in the shade as I am truly in the trail. I'll kind of peek out just for a second just to show you the mountain backdrop. I just spent close to 6 miles in this trail this morning, really in prayer and meditation, nature bathing, and in reflection on a show that I did with Mary Hill yesterday. That show was just so powerful because it just is a topic that we tend to avoid. We don't want to think about the time that we either have to work with someone, a loved one that needs to go in a hospice, or perhaps maybe even ourselves. Mary Hill came into the studio and shared how she made a difference in the life of those that were in their final days and transitioning to the other side. And it was just, the show, I didn't realize how much it impacted me until this morning when I was on my own hike and spiritual practice, and I actually put on a song that I had played as part of my eulogy at my dad's funeral back in, just a few years ago, about 3.5 years ago. Maybe it was 3 years ago. But in any event, good morning, Stacy. Good to see you this morning. And so it really gave me a chance to really hone in. And actually, I felt like I totally connected with my dad in song. I was singing along with a song that I played at my dad's funeral. It was a love song that I played for my mom and dad. They had been married over 50 years when my dad passed. And it was an opportunity for me to really connect with my dad. And before I knew it, of course, I was singing, but I was in tears. I was talking to my dad. And it's exactly what Mary talked about yesterday in the show. Is like, I asked her, so how does a loved one connect? How does someone that is still alive in this lifetime connect with perhaps a friend, a parent, a sibling that meant something to them, meant a lot to them, and they have passed and they feel like they haven't been able to connect with them and maybe say things that they're ready to say that perhaps they couldn't say while they were still alive. And so it really gave me that chance this morning to really reflect on my own moments saying goodbye to my dad. And here's my truth. I don't talk about this a whole lot. I've mentioned it over the past couple of years through perhaps some live shows, touched on it, but I really didn't deep dive into it. But here's my truth. I had spent my entire adult life blaming my mom and my dad and my sister for a lot of my own personal woes, for different reasons. You know, each relationship had a different set of circumstances that I held on to. But through holding on to my hurt feelings and the pain and disappointments and anger and resentments, I myself was living in a constant state of inner turmoil, inner bondage, and it kept me in it with them. The only way I knew how to detach from those feelings was I detached physically from the relationship. Not once, but twice. Once shortly after I got married, and a second time a short 4 years before I hit my rock bottom. And it wasn't until I hit my rock bottom, and for me that meant I was near death. It didn't mean that I was holed up drinking a bottle of whiskey a night or a vodka or wine. For me, it was my body was physically shutting down, and I was near death. And what that gave me was the opportunity to really reflect on my life, reflect on who I had become. And here's my truth. I knew who I had become, but I also didn't like who I had become. And I knew that I needed to either change or die. And part of the change was learning how to forgive myself and learning how to work through and walk through the process of forgiving my mom, my dad, my sister, perhaps some friends, even my wife at the time, who today is my ex-wife. But learning how to walk through that process, because I knew that as long as I held on to my anger, my resentments, and blaming all of them, every single one of those people in my life that I loved dearly, that I would never have a shot at healing my own mind, my own body, and my own soul. And so began my healing journey. And what the beautiful thing was, when I came out of that hospital on the 16th of October in 2015, I was open to receive. I was so desperate to heal, to feel better, to not just survive, but learn how to thrive in my own life, that I was willing to do things I had never dreamed would be possible, that I would be open to. And how I got there was I had to be willing to surrender. And through that surrendering, I was open to do some spiritual modalities that I never would have considered. Simple things like, believe it or not, working with a medium, working with a crystal light energy healer that really gave me some significant breakthroughs early on in my journey. And that led me to having the courage to reach out to my mom on a phone and make some amends immediately in that conversation after we hadn't been in touch for 4 years. And what I learned was I thought my dad had passed because I had actually done some work prior to this call with a medium that I was referred to. And in that medium appointment or meeting, I believe that she had in fact made contact with my dad. And so, and how I felt that was because the things she shared that my dad was saying to me, she couldn't have known. It was just things that only my dad could have known. And so I was at peace with that, and that all helped me reach out to my mom and make the call. And then when my mom answered and we talked, and she was open and very loving and appreciative, I then got to ask my mom if my dad had passed, and I presumed he had, and she shared with me that my dad was still alive. But it was 15 years of him battling the disease of Alzheimer's, and that led me to, as soon as I got well enough, healthy enough, to board an airplane. I flew across the U.S. and visited my mom and dad, and my sister flew in, and we spent a couple of days with me by my dad's bedside on the first day for sure. And it gave me an opportunity to have a conversation with my dad, somewhat similar to what Mary Hill talked about in the show yesterday. She whispered some things to her dad, and I did the same with my father. I did the same, and it was an opportunity to clean up my side of the street, make my amends, and through that process, it allowed me to continue to heal the inner wounds and pains that I had, and begin the process of really, when I talk about healing, I'm talking about forgiving myself, as well as no longer willing to accept unacceptable behavior for myself. And for me, that meant no longer blaming my mom or my dad for my woes, my mom and my dad for even the choices that they made as it related to our relationship that hurt me, that wounded me. Even as an adult, we're not just talking about as a child, but things take place even in our relationships as adults that hurt us, that wound us, that impact us at the heart space. I was willing to forgive. I was willing to work on the forgiving process, not only for myself, but for my mom and dad, because I understood that if I held on to it, that it was going to keep me in a bondage place for the rest of my life and was going to take me out way sooner than I needed to. And so began my healing journey. It was a beautiful experience. It has continued to unfold today. Well, let me say this. 5 weeks after I visited my dad, he passed away. But it gave me the opportunity to make my amends, to forgive myself and forgive my dad, and say what needed to be said while he was still alive. And I believe that even when we aren't given that opportunity, as many of us are not, we can clean up. We can connect with our parent, our loved one, our sibling, a friend, even after life for them, as Mary Hill described in the show yesterday, as she has also in her book, Messages from an Afterlife. Memoirs of a Hospice Nurse. And so I wanted to just share this with you because where this came from was truly the show yesterday really brought this out in me today as I was in my prayer and meditation, just reflecting on how many of us continue as adults to blame others for how we are feeling and how our life has turned out. And here was my experience and truth is that when I stopped blaming my loved ones, when I stopped blaming my mom, my dad, my sister, my friends, my ex-wife, even my ex-employers, my bosses, it gave me the freedom. It gave me the ability to start to heal, start to feel better about myself. Most importantly, it gave me the opportunity to grow up, to stop being the victim and stop blaming others for my woes, but to start to take responsibility for my own actions, for my own thoughts and my own behaviors in my life. And it was just an absolutely beautiful experience. It has continued to unfold. My relationship with my mom today is just absolutely amazing. It's a relationship today based on unconditional love. There are no conditions. We are just honest. We speak up when we're hurting. We share, we laugh. Sometimes we cry. My mom is one of my greatest supporters and continuously tells me how she feels about me today. And, for the first time in my adult life, I can trust the words that my mom speaks to me because I know they're coming from her heart space with no motive other than just acknowledging me and loving me. And I can do the same with my mom today, something that I never felt comfortable doing. And so, Mom, this Hike and Heal series is dedicated to you. I love you. Thank you for being open, having an open heart to forgive, and so that we can have a healthy relationship today. I love you. Have an awesome day. No matter what you got going on in your life today, all of you that are watching me on live or replay, take time for self-care. Because self-care for me was the gateway to learning how to like myself and eventually learning how to fall in love with myself. I want to just take one last moment to thank those of you that have joined me on this live. Linda, Adele, I have acknowledged you. Stacy, thank you so much for being here. Karen, Victor, bravo, coming in from Monrovia, California. Lucia, thank you so much for being here. Greg and Susan, Jewel, Anita, good to see you. Christine O'Connell coming in from Long Beach. She says, hi, Jay. Diana Lynn Daly, good to see you. Thank you for joining me in this live. Greg Battersby, one of my beautiful friends today. I look forward to having a conversation in about 5 minutes. Elizabeth Richter coming in from overseas. She says, good evening. Elizabeth, please remind me, are you coming in from Germany or the UK? I think that's one of those two. And Ashby, good to see you this morning. Again, let's stop blaming others for our woes. Let's stop blaming our parents, our siblings, our partners, our children, our doctors, whomever we are blaming for our feeling of sadness, anger, resentment, blame, guilt, shame. Let's stop doing it. Let's take this time to grow up. Let's take this time to start to hold ourselves accountable and responsible for the choices that we make today. We can change today. How we do that is by stop blaming others and start taking accountability through action, massive action steps in our life. And that's how we start to heal mind, body, and soul. Have an awesome day. I love you. Take care. Bye-bye.